I'm going to do something that seems impossible. I'm going to critique something that I actually like.
Is it possible to learn this power?
The Disney remakes have been around for some time now. I believe the first one started with Cinderella, and immediately they were met with a reaction that says, how dare you take something that's perfect, my childhood, and try to remake it? And I understand where people are coming from. It's really hard to accept that Disney would remake what's, in many of our eyes, already perfect. And whenever you try to remake something from someone's childhood, it's often met with hostility. However, there are those of us, like myself, who are excited to see what Disney does with these new interpretations. I'll be the first to admit, and I know there are a lot of others out there, that we enjoy some of the remakes, but they will never surpass the originals. I think the one that came closest to almost meeting the greatness of the original was actually Beauty and the Beast. Beauty and the Beast is my favorite Disney movie, with its great story, wonderful romance, and very memorable characters. However, there was one scene while I was in the theater that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. It's a scene where the Beast is trying to get Belle to come down to have dinner with him. In the original, he's super angry, he comes off as powerful, and he bangs on the door.
I thought I told you to come down to dinner.
I'm not hungry.
You'll come out or I'll break down the door.
Notice how it stays with the Beast. It doesn't show Belle behind the door. In animation, you always want to put the camera where the action is. The Beast is the most interesting character to look at in this scene, and so the camera is kept on him, and for comedic effect, we don't actually see what Belle is doing or her expressions because it's more fun to watch the Beast. In the live action interpretation of this, the way it's filmed, there's no energy to it. You don't get to see the expressions on his face. Just look at him. He's trying to hold back his anger because he's so frustrated with Belle. But none of that is conveyed in the live action version because they can't. They can to some extent, but there's something missing. There's an energy, a flow that just isn't there. And that's why they cut between Belle's reaction behind the door and Beast, because neither one of them are doing anything that's super interesting in order to keep the audience engaged. The other scene that was good, but not as powerful as the original, was the transformation. The transformation swells, the music is perfect, and I love how the music is perfectly timed with the Beast turning to the camera. It's amazing. You just can't beat it. But like I said, I do think that these movies are at least good, at least so far. I haven't seen Lion King, but we're actually going to talk about that in this video. But the reason I think that the Disney remakes will never surpass the originals is for 3 reasons.
3 wishes to be exact.
The first reason is that animation is limitless. In the realms of reality, there are things that normal people just can't do. They can't stretch their faces to be more expressive, but in animation, cartoons do this all the time. There are action sequences that work in animation that you could never do in live action. Also, did you ever notice how Aladdin jumps onto a ruby and skateboards on it until he jumps onto Jafar and stabs him right? That's really violent.
Break 'em, rack 'em, rock 'em, rake, stick that sword into that snake.
There are places that you just can't go. Well, you could go, it just cost you a lot of money. But with animation, you could go anywhere. You could have anything in your movie because the only thing limiting you is your imagination. In the new live action Aladdin, which I actually liked, there's a few scenes that kind of were good, but not as great as they could be. In A Whole New World, in the original movie, we get to see Aladdin and Jasmine fly to Greece, to Egypt, and even China. In the live action remake, they stay in Agrabah, which it's a good sequence, but it's not nearly as exciting as the original, where they get to actually see the whole world, which is what the song is about. In an effort to keep it as real as possible, you actually lose something in the process, which is something that the new Lion King remake seems to be coming under fire for. The second one is character. Now, there's something great about Disney magic, and that Disney magic, I think, comes from characters and their character design. If you look at Genie, Genie has no straight lines on him, and the artist intentionally did that because the fact that he has curves all over his body allows him to shapeshift into any character he wants. It also says something about his personal character. Genie is full of energy. He's always moving. He's not really stable. Stable as in he's never standing still. You can almost never see Genie standing still unless it's an emotional moment. He's always on the move. This says something about his character subliminally to the viewer. Also, the character was drawn with Robin Williams in mind. That perfect blend of animation and voice acting go perfectly together because that's what the artist envisioned. One of the complaints that I've given in a lot of my trailer reviews is that the villains seem underwhelming to me. Disney animates their villains to say something about their character, just like their protagonists do. Jafar has a twisted beard, showing that already you know from the get-go there's something off about him, which is shown in the fact that he's actually slightly insane. His long fingers show that he has a long reach towards power. His slender figure evokes something of a towering presence. These are things that are hard to do because human beings don't really look like this.
You've heard of the golden rule, haven't you? Whoever has the gold makes the rules.
But let's use an example from the new Lion King. Now, if I take away the audio from this scene, it's very hard to see what the characters are feeling and what their emotions are, and even getting a sense for their character. However, in the original, you can tell that Timon's arrogant, his self-imposed leadership. You can see through Pumbaa's facial expressions that he has a huge heart and concern. But none of that is conveyed in the live-action remake. Well, you know what I mean by live action. I'm done trying to explain it at this point. Each Disney character has a unique design that not only is fun and cool to look at, but also says something about that character. Which brings us to our final point, the curse of nostalgia. Really hard to remake something that is still fresh in a lot of people's minds, particularly the minds of us who grew up with it. Nostalgia is a very powerful thing, and if you don't use it correctly, it can backfire on you as a filmmaker. A lot of these Disney remakes are movies that only came out 20 years ago, which is why I think the movie that seems to be liked generally by most critics and a lot of audience the most is The Jungle Book. The Jungle Book came out decades ago, and it held on to some of the key concepts, but was able to tell somewhat of an original story, which is a gamble, because a lot of us are trying to see the movie that we grew up with just in a slightly different way, but not too differently. Disney's kind of between a rock and a hard place. If they had changed the plot to Beauty and the Beast, I wouldn't have liked it. Neither would a lot of other people. But one could say at least we get something of an original story. But then again, why would you call it Beauty and the Beast? You would have to call it something different, tell a different story. But I don't think that's what Disney's going for. The curse of nostalgia can often hold a movie back, unless you do something just as good or better. And that's what I'm looking for in these Disney remakes. Something just as good or better. It's sad to say that hand-drawn animation isn't really around anymore in terms of theatrical releases. The Princess and the Frog was a wonderful film that I really enjoyed. Not the best of Disney, but definitely a good one. And it was nice to see Disney return to form. I'd like to see more of those, because with animation, as I said before, the potential is limitless. You can do whatever you want. Animation is a hard craft that takes hours, even years just to make. It takes Pixar Animation Studios a whole week just to do 3 seconds of animation. And with hand-drawn animation, it probably took even longer. Animation is a great art form. An art form that unfortunately isn't as recognized as I think it should be. Like the scene where Belle puts her head on the beast's chest. As he's growing in confidence throughout the song, we see that he's nervous at first, but then he grows in confidence, all accumulating to that point where she puts her head on his chest and he gives a Lumiere and Cogsworth a smile. Those things aren't conveyed. Maybe it's because they can't, or because they just don't understand how important little moments like that are in building an experience for your film. I don't know. But I do know this. Although I enjoy the live-action remakes, I know they will never ever surpass the originals. But I think that's okay.
Are you nuts?
But maybe you have a different perspective. Maybe you feel like it's just a waste of time. If it can't be better, then why do it? And maybe you have a point there.
Of course. Who's the brains of this outfit?
But I am excited to continue to see what Disney does, and I'm hoping that when we are out of this Disney remake phase, we can look at surprising and wonderful new content. Maybe some of these remakes will get a sequel, and they'll be able to be original in that way. Who knows? And as for Pixar animation, I didn't like Toy Story 4.
Made you look.
Seriously, I didn't like it.